Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Neumaier, film critic for WOR Radio. Let's have a huge round of applause, please, for A Very British Scandal. It premieres on Amazon Prime April 22nd, and now it is my pleasure to welcome Claire Foy and Paul Bettany.
Hello.
Hello.
You've got a drink. I'm jealous. Okay.
All right. Have a seat, please. Thank you guys for being here so much. Congratulations on the film. It is fantastic, and you guys are fantastic in it. I've seen all 3 episodes, and this first episode is fantastic, but just so you know that there's lots of sex and lots of greed and lots of all the things that go with a scandal coming up in those subsequent 2 episodes.
No, I'm not.
Yep.
No, I'm not.
Claire, to start off with ladies first, let's talk about as you first read the script, as you kind of figured out the character of Margaret Wisham, and what about her spoke to you. What was the key to her for you in kind of figuring her out?
I don't think I ever figured her out, to be honest. And I don't think, and this is not to say the show failed, but I don't think the show really figures her out. I think she was lots of different people, and she was a very complicated woman, and what she appeared to be and what she was on the inside were 2 very, very different things. And I think that you would need kind of 8 hours, basically, to kind of delve to the depths of her. But I think for me, the understanding that I took away from it was her connection to her father, and she was very much like kind of the archetypal daddy's girl, and she was born here in New York, and he was an industrialist and was very, very wealthy and very clever man, and very much a man that a young girl would fall in love with. And her mother was very hard on her, and hence her stammer, and I think she had kind of complicated childhood, and that's what I sort of clung on to, and that was bled into her relationship with men, and hence then the idea of attracting men and getting attention from men, having conquest, and that meant a lot to her and who she was. But I think she was kind of unknowable, really, because the people that we knew of or spoke to, or the people that kind of we heard stories about, you wouldn't believe the things she did, and the propositions she made to people. It's pretty amazing. And would have loved it to have been in the show, but there weren't enough hours. She was kind of unknowable and amazing in her kind of ways.
And in fact, even obviously the show alludes to it, but she was one of the most photographed women in the world in the 30s and the 40s, as she was a socialite coming up, and she kind of had a level of fame that at that time was even pretty unheard of in the 30s and 40s, right?
Yeah, so when she got married to her first husband, Charles Sweeney, who's a really famous American kind of guy, like thousands of people turned out. And she was in a song. She was in "You're the Tops." Yep. She was in, you couldn't get more famous than she was. And so her fall from grace, when she was slightly older, when her sort of, I suppose, quote unquote, her time had passed, which I don't particularly believe in, but is really interesting, because she basically still lived in the world where she was untouchable, and she could control the media and the narrative around her, and that's hence why she kept going for as long as she did. But you guys have only seen episode 1. Yeah. Oh, okay, so I should stop talking then, because it all goes terribly wrong. Doesn't it, though? What happens at the end of episode 1? Oh, no, it's really bad.
It goes really wrong.
Really wrong. And he's a terrible person.
Which brings us then to Ian Campbell, the Duke of Argyll. And Paul, same question. What was the key to him for you? He is a piece of work. He is corrosive and complex in a lot of ways. What, as you were reading the script and kind of figuring him out, what was the key to him for you?
I just felt like we had the same sort of fluffy core, that I was able to really key into. No, I really don't know, and I don't know how to answer the question. I have a real sense of sort of injustice in life, and I think if you just apply that, even when it's really inappropriate, like, I can't believe this woman's behaving like this and not just giving me all of her money while I destroy her. It's outrageous, I kind of hope that would work. You know, I think I think he feels a real sense of injustice. I brought you into the aristocracy, and you're not going to give me all your money. What the hell? I don't get it. You know. So, but I think he felt that keenly. You know. And I think he was probably a sociopath. Yeah. So there's also that.
It's interesting because one of the things to my eye that sort of leapt out in some ways is that he sort of is a man between eras. He is a duke. He has his title only because of the tendrils of distant family relation, and yet also, as somebody comments to Margaret, he was bad when he went into the war, and then he was in prisoner of war for 5 years, and he was bad when he came out. In some ways, he sort of is ill fit for the times that he's living in, and it almost feels like he is neither of this past world of which his title is sort of this ghost of his family, and the modern era that he's living in.
I think that's right. I think that's the end of the British Empire, and you know, the sun would never set on the British Empire, and by Christ, it set quickly after 1945. You know, and So I think you're right. He also came out of a prisoner of war camp. He was 70 pounds when he got home. And he probably was self-medicating a PTSD, none of which goes to absolve the behavior that he then displayed, but might make for a more interesting character if you thought about it, and less moustache twirling. You know, potentially.
Yeah, less of a wastrel, and there's sort of more things going on there beneath the surface. Claire, Margaret's modernity, then to kind of play off that, is also then echoing the lack of that in Ian, and I think that she's obviously sort of in some ways a woman ahead of her time. She is obviously she's sort of yearning for something as much as she wants the world of the castle. She is also much more comfortable in the world of London pubs and having a good time and sort of in that, in everything that entails. And really sort
like
of
you, Claire.
Yeah.
I love London pubs.
I know.
As do you, Paul.
Yeah, I'm fond of them myself.
And so in some ways, she's sort of trying to find the path that sort of has been set for her, or that she is expected to follow, and yet also she also wants to live her own life, right?
I think it's interesting. I think that, so it's really important to, a lot of the stuff that, if you look her up, basically, when you go home, look her up on the internet. And she had 8 miscarriages before she conceived a child. She fell down a lift shaft, nearly died. She had septicemia, she nearly died. She was proposed to about 15 times before she actually married anyone. One of her, lovers who she was engaged to died in a plane crash. She's like, but she wears it very lightly and also incredibly entitled. So she's lived 1,000 lives, basically, before she's met Ian. And she's also incredibly entitled, incredibly privileged. She has all this money. She has a father who adores her, a mother who basically has molded her and hates her all at the same time. And so it's very complicated when you play someone like that, because a part of you goes, what is there in you that I need to discover? And there's also a part that has massive sympathy, because she's been made into who she is. And that was basically what attracted me to her, because I had a real understanding of the fact that she had no option, basically, when she married this extraordinary man that she thought she could make into... She could polish him and make him more extraordinary than he was. He didn't see the potential in himself, and they could be a power couple like no one could imagine, and she could have this castle, and she could be aristocracy. And when that all falls apart, which it inevitably does in episode 2 and 3, even though you're looking at someone who's incredibly entitled, I really hope the audience have a sympathy for the fact that she's living in a world that is not connected to reality and about herself as well, and that is not what you asked me.
It's a fine answer nonetheless.
What did you ask me?
I completely forgot. That fantastic answer wiped it out.
No,
That's
it's
okay.
not an answer. I didn't answer the question.
Well, that she was sort of in some
You
ways
answered
a
all
woman.
of the
she
other
wasn't ahead of her
questions.
time because... Okay, so hang on, I'm getting to it. So she's not ahead of her time because she's very much driven by her own desire and want, which I think in life, very few people have are able to be. Wouldn't it be an amazing world if we could all follow whatever we want and we all had inexhaustible amounts of money and privilege that meant that we were able to do that? And she genuinely is. She was engaged to, men would propose to her at a drop of a hat. She just had that ability. And the first person she ever met in her life who put a stop to her was Ian Campbell. And she could not stomach it. She could not stomach the fact that that happened. And I think that it becomes very easy as an audience, or as I feel, that you can project onto a woman at a time and say, you're a proto-feminist, or you're someone who's standing up for a minority. And she genuinely wasn't. There should be no disillusion about that. She was out for herself, basically. But that shouldn't mean that the audience have no sympathy for her. And I have sympathy for her and understand her, and I hope that inevitably by the end, people kind of go, even though she's deeply difficult to love, you get that she still shouldn't be treated in that way. No one should. That's the hope.
Yeah, no, it does. And without giving away anything from the 2 subsequent episodes, which definitely need to be seen. No, you didn't.
I am giving everything away.
What I want to remark upon, you were fine. What I want to remark upon is the notion of that the way society and the British courts sort of then react to her, and those headlines in 1963, which were very much, in some ways, something you would have seen 30 years later in regards to holding her up as an example in some ways, inappropriately so, is something that I think is there's an end crawl at the end of the last episode that really sort of brings it all home, that she's the first woman to be.
Really bad. You guys really have to watch the next 2
episodes.
It makes a lot of sense by episode 3.
But that also, let's bring up, I also want to have a round of applause, please, for the writer and creator, Sarah Phelps, of the show. Let's have a round of applause for her. And having her create the story, having a woman's point of view, obviously, is very important in having in kind of readjusting Margaret's story for the modern era, right? Either one of you could probably answer.
Yeah, I
don't think I should.
I think you should maybe be quiet.
I'm going to sit down.
But you can definitely talk about Anne Sawicki.
I'll deal with it later.
No, I think that the interesting thing is that Sarah had kind of an obsession with this character and what she represented for a long time. For kind of 20 years, she's been really interested in who she was. And Margaret has had, when you go home and you go on the internet, I keep saying internet like I'm 1,000 years old, but...
the World Wide
Web. Blah, 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 blah. But when you do...
might have heard of it.
There's a wealth of information about her because she was so famous. And Sarah was really interested in her. But what Paul is now going to talk to you about is that Anne came along and Sarah had written this, yes you are, this incredible script which was from a position of real admiration and kind of love for this woman. And Anne basically came along and was very Norwegian. And this is really interesting, but I want to know about what, Paul Bettany?
Oh, wow. Well, I think that we all live in America, and you have some great scandals yourself, but what makes this different is the class system, right? So she has a bad marriage with this terrible chap, and she is buying into the aristocracy. He feels that it's a contract, she has money, he's an impoverished aristocrat, and she sort of, he feels like, well, here's your title, and now give me your money, right? And when things go badly in that marriage, so sorry, just getting rid of that. Might be a job, but you never know. Gotta check. It wasn't, of course. But when things go badly in that that contract, he feels like she's reneged on the deal, and the entire class system surrounds him and protects him, and cleaves her from the herd and destroys her. That's what you're going to see in episodes 2 and 3. But the point being is that Anne Sawicki is Scandinavian. In fact, she's Norwegian, to be more specific, and she doesn't have any sort of baggage about the English class system. And I think it was really a smart idea to have Anne as the director, because she was unencumbered by all of those expectations and all of those prejudices, and she was just like, what's going on with this crazy couple, you know? And let's face it, if you take all of that out of it, they're a really crazy couple. They're like two narcissists that in search of a codependent that find each other and sort of destroy each other. And that is the thing that I think that Anne was most interested in.
Yeah, it brings a gothic quality to it, which is really terrific. Like it's almost like and it's a gothic quality that comes from inside of them. It's like it's not even talking about the amazing castle, which by the way you guys filmed that, I understand, right outside of it. Inverary Castle, is that right?
We're in the castle.
You were in the castle, right? I mean, that's amazing. I mean, what was it like filming? Must have obviously
Why
helped.
did they let us in there?
What?
Yeah, I mean,
No idea.
No idea. No, it was pretty extra. I've never ever. Hang on. No, I've never ever filmed anywhere where what the story was talking about was actually happening.
Yeah.
You film places that look like it or kind of are trying to emulate it, but you've never actually filmed where it actually happened. And then we met the Duke of Argyll, and
He had some nice whiskey.
he had some lovely whiskey. And he told us a lot of things we can never tell anyone. No. But it was really extraordinary to realise this story basically, fundamentally, is about a family and about a divorce. And I don't think that I really realised that until we were shooting the scenes, which you haven't seen, when they basically get divorced.
Yeah.
Which really brought it home to me. I was like, this is basically a couple and it's playing out on a stage and it happens all the time, and it's deeply hurtful and depressing. But when we were in the castle and we were talking to him about it, and he has scrapbooks of the whole proceedings, and I can't even tell you, like, when you get on the internet, when you get home, you will see some of the stuff that they did to each other. In the interweb, in the World Wide
waste
Web.
of time.
You shall see the truth.
Yes.
But it is pretty amazing what they did to each other.
Yeah. Paul, I want to talk to you about Ian's plans, which I just think is a great motif in all 3 episodes of Paul's plans to salvage the shipwreck from Tobermory Bay, and what it kind of represents. It's this submerged thing. I mean, it could be lots of different things. It's such a, it's like a rosebud type thing for him. This sense of trying to get this shipwreck out. Let's just kind of talk about that as a great motif in the story, and that how it reflects on Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right, and I think that what you were talking about the sort of the changing of the guard in terms of sort of the end of the British Empire, I think that's fascinating. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that I heard a story about Ian trying to, well, he bought a circus. So there's also that he was trying for a lot of things. He just needed money, and then when he became incumbent of this title and all of this land to take care of, I think that he was driven to even more extreme behavior.
Yeah. Was there because the story takes place across 16 years. You see it at the beginning here. It starts in 63 and they meet in 47. Was there
an age a day?
Yeah, an age a day. But was there a through line that the two of you sort of figured out in terms of their relationship, because it obviously has highs and lows and traumas and everything in between? Was there a through line that you figured out would kind of always be there, or maybe kind of ebb and flow sometimes as the scening went on?
I think that we sort of came up with the idea that they had come to a sort of decision that they would never bore each other. And that was the contract that they sort of signed with each other. And of course, an alcoholic, pill-popping misogynist is boring after a while, you know. And I feel like he thought that she was reneging on the contract by asking questions about about money, for instance. Where are you spending my money? It's so boring of you. I thought we weren't going to do this. And it became complicated very quickly, I think.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting that, because basically myself and Paul came up with the idea in a weird way of the boredom element of it. Because for us, the idea they were a conventional couple, when he'd been divorced twice, she'd been divorced once, I think the jig's up. And I also think that going into it, they had met their match in a very honest way. And the proposal of marriage is something that I'm really proud of in the show, in the sense that it's not a romantic...
that was totally made up.
That was fictionalized. That was something that basically came out of our understanding of the relationship with them. And we were filming quite a long time before we actually even did that.
Yeah.
But I think that it plays into the fact that neither of them wanted what was expected of them. And I think when you watch episode 2 and 3, I'm so sorry to keep going on about it, but
You'll see how much better than episode 1 it was.
we're really good in it. We're so good in it. But the idea that that's what happens in marriage. You enter into it, especially when you enter into it and neither of them are particularly self-aware or willing for change. You enter into it with these sets of ideas of who that person is going to be and what they're going to be at the end. And then the betrayal is that they're not that person, and they stick with it. And it's watching two people stick with the ideology of what they had agreed to at the beginning. And then when you watch episode 3, one of them leaves that pact. Yeah. One of them leaves that pact. And that is basically the disintegration of the idea of what it was that they agreed to in the begingoing.
Right.
Episode 3 has the...
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And
Exactly right.
eloquently put.
I'm going to wrap up by asking each of you what surprised you the most about the production. Either it could have been something that you read or something that you didn't know about this story, or maybe just anything in terms of what it encompasses.
The catering. I found incredibly surprising.
He hadn't worked in the United Kingdom for a very long time, and it was...
No craft service. What the... what surprised me was the speed that we were asked to do it at. But really, I'm not sure I was... I mean, if I'm honest about it, the first thing that happened was my agent rang me up and said, there's a Claire Foy project. And I was, no, you're a treasure of the nation.
Which nation?
It's like a Claire
United
Foy
Nations.
project.
That's such a funny...
Yeah, and so I was kind of in from then, and then the scripts turned up, and they were great. But then I was thinking, Claire Foy, I really did. I thought she's such a great actress, and like we'll have so much fun playing these. I guess what I could say is that I thought watching the dissolution of this marriage would be really dull if it didn't have a kind of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf quality to it, where they were enjoying each other's cruelty, and I knew I would find that in Claire.
Paul Bettany, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I point out that every day when we were having a tough day or everything was really hard, he was like, I'm only here for you. And I'm like, don't blame me for the reason why
You're a
here.
treasure of the nation.
He's really trying to make that happen. I'm not, and no one's... Don't put that on me.
It's your fault, Claire.
That's what he's trying to say.
Open the pod bay doors, Cal.
I think I was really... What was I surprised by? I don't know. I think when you're shooting something sometimes and it's really overwhelming, and this was really overwhelming because it was 3 months shoot, it was during COVID, it was very little prep. And I think that even Sarah would say that it wasn't in a position to not necessarily be shot, but it wasn't in a position where it had been delved into. Yeah. And we basically put the brakes on it very early on and said, we need 3 days of rehearsal, because one, I've never met the man who's supposed to be my husband, and we'd never actually been in a room together. And that was like to me the biggest relief of all time. Is he walked in this very strange place, which was basically on a motorway in England, and you'd been in isolation for 2 weeks.
Yes, I have. Not
Gone
because anybody had
mad.
asked me to, but just nobody
just
had
for
called.
Fun. And immediately we walked into the room and we sat down and we started talking about the first scene that I had millions of questions about and Paul had millions of questions about. And I went, oh, thank God, we're on the same page. And as soon as that happened, I just knew that we would be each other's ally and that we'd have each other's back. And that basically is what happened for the entire shoot until he left 7 weeks in and I had to do the rest of the 3 weeks on my own. And I was just bereft. But that was the thing, I think, that the understanding that you build a story so many times. A lot of the time it's on the page and I get that and it's there. But in this situation, I got to the end of the show and I went, and it sounds really terrible, but we built something together and we have formulated this relationship, and hopefully that is why the show will stand up, because you believe that these two people had a really complicated and not kind of simple relationship, and that's what people hopefully
we're
will
not
follow.
trying to say something binary and simple.
Yeah.
But I guess suffice to say that it all is part of the sort of the fabric of the 3 episodes and how it feels so real. Even when she's asking about the something on the tapestry and it's Forget Not, which ends up being the title of her autobiography in a few years. So it is all sort of in there, and all of that from the intimacy coordinator on just helps make this show really terrific and extraordinary, and you're both fantastic in it. Thank you so much. I just want to ask everybody if you can go to the Django room afterwards. There's a reception there, but please leave through the back door if you could. That would be great. And how about a round of applause, please, for Paul Bettany and Claire Foy.
Thank you so much.
A Very British Scandal debuts on Amazon Prime April 22nd.